The Vote Mama Foundation is a 501c3, and it's the leading source on research and analysis on the political participation of moms. They have this amazing report called The Politics of Parenthood, and its second kind of iteration has just been released. And I invited the head of Vote Mama, Liuba Grechen Shirley, to be able to come and talk to us about the findings, because they're pretty jaw-dropping. This idea that working moms of minor children, they're so severely underrepresented in Congress right now, and why when you actually put moms into places of power like Congress, how policies and laws are created that benefit all Americans, not just parents. Take a listen. And joining me now is Liuba Grechen Shirley from one of my favorite organizations, Vote Mama Foundation. Liuba, it's good to see you.
It's good to see you. Thank you for having me.
Listen, we were kind of joking before we hit record on this, right? That I asked how you're doing. And these days, that's a loaded question, I will concede. But I do care because you cared enough to run for Congress, right? You ran for office while you had, what was it, a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old at the time?
They were 1 and 3. Yep. I had 2 toddlers.
And I was incredibly impressed when you and I first crossed paths, and I learned about your efforts to get the FEC to approve the use of campaign funds for childcare. Some of this stuff seems like just like a logical, no-brainer thing. And yet the fact that you actually had to change the course of the tide to allow for something like this is mind-boggling to me.
Yeah, it's true. I remember even asking the question, and everyone said that I was crazy and that it was political suicide and you can't possibly put this request in. You'll be attacked for being a mom and a woman, and for even talking about, the fact that I had 2 babies that I was, the full-time caregiver for. And my campaign manager was the only person who supported the request in the beginning, and we put this request in. And I remember going down to DC with 2 babies in tow thinking they were going to grill me. And they didn't. It was a bipartisan unanimous decision, and they thanked me for putting the request in. And they said, this really does make it easier for working class people to run, because you have to be a millionaire. You have to be more than a millionaire to run for Congress. You work full time for 2 years with no salary. It's the longest job interview you'll ever have. And there's a very clear reason that we have more millionaires in Congress than moms. And our policies are a direct result of that lacked lived experience.
And that is something that I have been pushing steadily here at this channel and on my other social media platforms. And frankly, in any space that I have the privilege of being in, my encouragement is to get people to run for local and state office. I do respect the federal office. I have some issues with our electeds right now being disconnected to the realities of, I think, the working class families and the demands on especially working mothers. But my push is for people to run. In the interest of full disclosure, some people do know that I was recently approached to run for office here in Florida. We are in dire need of representation here. And there were a lot of considerations, part of which were financial, and largely which were driven by the fact that I have a 10-year-old daughter and her needs. And I only have 1 kid. I can't imagine juggling more than one. I'm not really capable of handling one right now, Liuba, but the siren song of running for office was profound for me. Yeah. And in the end, I decided not to run right now. But when I read the latest Politics of Parenthood report, which I'm going to link, it is essential reading for those of you that are tuning in and listening to this conversation with Liuba. It's the second installment of the federal Politics of Parenthood report with data to reflect the parenthood status of all members of the 119th Congress, the one that I guess technically isn't seated right now in the shutdown. But it reflects the status of all members of the 119th Congress in addition to other demographic variables. It's an incredible resource, but it's kind of depressing to read because the takeaways are really not supportive of the idea of having working moms in Congress. Although I will say, and I am going to applaud this, from the 118th Congress, where it was only 7% of that Congress were moms of minor children, we've now seen an increase of 8.3% in the 119th Congress, but it's still only 7.2% of all members.
That is true. Only 39 of our members of Congress are moms of minor children. So if you look at who our representatives are, you can understand why our policies are the way they are. Our policies fail women and children in this country. We have the worst maternal mortality rate in the industrialized world. We are the only industrialized country without paid family leave. In the majority of our states, childcare is more expensive than college. So we look at these policies and you start to understand why? And it's because we're missing this really critical lived experience. When you raise a child, when you give birth in this country, 1 in 4 of us go back to work 10 days after giving birth. We are still bleeding at that point. You need that lived experience because legislators legislate on their lived experience. And when you don't have that experience at the decision-making table, we are seeing these policies that just fail women and they fail children. So 7.2% of our members of Congress are moms of minor children. If you actually look at the comparison between dads to moms, this is where it really starts to stand out. It's 3-to-1 dads to moms. But when you look at parents under the age of 6, it's 9-to-1. 9-to-1. And I was planning to run the second time around and I was pregnant with my third child. And that was the hardest decision. I chose not to run because I remember sitting down with my team and they were like, well, you can take 2 weeks off after childbirth and you'll be right back out on the campaign trail. 2 weeks after my first son, my second child was born, I was hospitalized with an infection and I was in the hospital for a week. And there was no way that I could process being out, 18 hours a day on the campaign trail 2 weeks after giving birth. And I chose not to run. But the same way you chose not to run, we're missing that lived experience now. So we need to break all the barriers. We need to make Congress and state legislative seats more accessible to moms.
Yeah, and that's the reason, obviously, part of the reason why I'm so excited about Vote Mama all the time. It's just the realistic approach that you guys have to not only running for office, but also lobbying for change, right? And making sure that the right legislation gets advanced. I want to focus on a few of the key findings from this report. To what you just said, the dads outnumber the moms 3-to-1 among parents of minor children. And as you noted, 9-to-1 among parents with kids under 6. And only 4% of senators are moms of minor children. 69.2% of moms of minors are Democrats, which I thought was interesting. 61.3% of dads of minors are Republicans. Mm-hmm. And then these numbers were just galling to me. 3% of Congress members are moms of color with minor children, which I think is a reflection of what's happening right now in America. And in terms of representation for single parents and LGBTQ plus parents, there was only one LGBTQ plus parent of a minor child or minor children, only 9 single parents of minor children, and only 4 single moms. And then this one really, Liuba, 29 states have 0 mothers of minor children representing them in Congress. 29 states.
I have good news for you though. When Liuba Grechen actually gets sworn in, she will be the first mom to represent Arizona, mom of minor children. So we'll be down to 28 states. There will only be 28 states at that point once she is sworn in. But yeah, more than half of our states don't have a single mom representing them. And if you look at the gubernatorial numbers, at the time we wrote this report, there were only 3 moms of minor children serving as governor. That means that 97% of the population of our country does not have a mom of minor children as their governor. That number is actually now down to 2 because the New Hampshire governor's child is now not a minor anymore, just had a birthday a few weeks ago. So technically there are only 2 moms right now who are governor, who are moms of minor children.
Yeah, and I guess I should have started with this because, and I know that you share this sentiment with me, right? I want to be clear to all the people that are tuning in that are not moms, 1, or not moms of minor children, 2, right? There's no kind of indictment of that, right? In fact, for the longest of times, I wasn't planning on having children, right? But I think, to your point, the lived experience of being a mom, especially of a minor child, is just yet part of the fabric of what Congress could be made of, right? That could really lend towards promoting policies that are beneficial for all people, right? Not just moms of children.
No. When moms get elected, statistically, we introduce and we pass legislation on education, on reproductive rights, on healthcare, on childcare, on paid family leave. And anytime I talked about childcare or paid family leave when I ran for office, I kid you not, every single time someone would say, you should ignore the women's issues and you should stick to the bread and butter issues. And I was so furious every time because they're the most basic bread and butter issues this country faces. And it doesn't just affect moms. It affects business owners. It affects anybody who is affected by our economy. Because if we had similar labor force participation rates to countries like Canada and Germany that have paid family leave, quality, subsidized, affordable childcare, we'd add 5.5 million women to the workforce. We'd add $500 billion a year to the economy. That affects everyone. Doesn't matter if you're a mom, a dad, if you have no children. And the reality is that by the time American women are 45 years old, 85% of us are moms. And yet just 7.2% of our Congress members are moms of minor kids. So it's literally that we are missing this huge lived experience that so many people in this country are dealing with. And we don't have that perspective. We have so many important perspectives, and legislators. I actually spoke with a man who is a state legislator, and he said to me at one point, he's like, do you mean to tell me, we were just talking, and he's like, do you mean to tell me that because I've never nursed a child, I can't pass legislation on And I started to laugh because I was telling him the story of Jen McClellan, who's now a Congress mama, who was a state senator at the time. And in Virginia, they were talking about legislation, and it was about making sure that women had the time to go and pump after giving birth. Yeah. And the men were saying, well, can't you just schedule it around this time? And she's like, Liuba, I had to stand up on the floor and literally explain how breastfeeding works, that we can't schedule time for ourselves to pump. It's not biologically, it doesn't work that way. And I was telling this story to this gentleman, and he's like, so what? I've never done it. I can't pass legislation on it. And I said, you can if you have colleagues who can explain to you that personal lived experience so that you have that knowledge, that you understand that experience. And we're doing a detriment to the other members of Congress and state legislators when they don't have colleagues who have that lived experience, who can talk about what it's like to give birth in a country that has no paid family leave, no childcare, more than half of the people in bankruptcy are there because of medical bills. People go into debt when they have children in this country. That's not a healthy country.
Yeah, and it's not just the ability to explain it. It's the empathy that builds from working alongside, right? I mean, I know that it's an incredibly polarized Congress right now, and frankly, state legislatures as well, right? But we do see relationships and friendships that are built from members of opposite parties simply because you do spend time with these people in DC, right? Or in elected office, and just them knowing what you have gone through or are going through, because we've seen it recently, right, with the bipartisan move between the Republicans and the Democrats in Congress to allow for the ability to vote remotely if you've had a child. I mean, it just seems so antithetical and almost like, counterintuitive to not allow that to happen. And yet we're still traveling under super antiquated concepts still.
The entire system is antiquated. You hit the nail on the head with that. Congress was not designed for moms because it was designed by wealthy white landowning men for wealthy white landowning men at a time where we didn't have the right to vote. And Congress and all of our state legislatures need to be modernized. If you look at state legislators, there are only 4 states that pay a livable wage. So you end up with people who are retired or independently wealthy who can actually serve in those seats. And we have seen so many incredible moms, middle class, everyday working Americans who get into those state legislative seats and then actually step down and run for a city council seat or a mayoral position because it pays a livable wage and they don't have to commute back and forth between their home district and the Capitol. The system needs to be revised. You mentioned proxy voting. Proxy voting is a simple concept. We did it during COVID. Mike Johnson himself voted, 39 times via proxy and then called it unconstitutional and said that the women were too emotional when they were working to get proxy voting. And this was a bipartisan move. We had Rep. Anna Paulina Luna and Rep. Brittany Pedersen, both the 13th and the 14th women to ever give birth while serving in Congress. And Mike Johnson called them emotional, but then he shut down Congress because he didn't get his way. So let's talk about who's over emotional.
True. He's emotional, as I like to call it. He's emotional. So there was some great. I liked this description, Liuba, because it really resonated not only with me, but it makes sense. So research, and this is grounded in research, folks, women often wait to run for office until their children are grown up. And they're less likely to run if they are the primary breadwinners in their homes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it says here, from 1973 to 2013, moms were more likely to sponsor legislation supporting children's welfare and families than were women without children. This type of advocacy, driven by lived experience, is known as substantive representation and essential to a truly representative democracy, which I have to agree. I mean, I love the idea of substantive representation. It transcends just moms with children. It's me being Asian American, right? And growing up here, being first generation. It's, people that come from families that only had one parent, I mean, these are the things that I love the idea of breaking those norms and institutions that are just too traditional and are just not a reflection of the realities of America.
Agreed completely. That lived experience, that having those different perspectives at the decision-making table is how we actually have policy that supports most Americans. And you had said something a few minutes ago about that lived experience and sharing that just common, the common lived experience. So before the 90s, most legislators would actually move to Washington. They would move their families to Washington, and their kids would go to school together. They would see each other in the community. They would go to church together. They would have dinners together. And there was this bipartisan working relationship because they knew each other's families. And it was really in the 90s when Newt Gingrich, who was Speaker of the House back then, started to say, you have to stay in your district. Don't move your family to Washington. And this is one of those norms that really harms moms, in particular moms of minor children who have caregiving responsibilities, because it has become the norm that you keep your family now in your district and you go to Washington. And, Kirsten Gillibrand will be the first person to tell you, if you do that, you end up becoming a parent via FaceTime because you miss out on the entire week with your children. Then you're back in your district and you have to go and, go to town halls and pancake breakfasts and constituent meetings and talk to people, and you don't really get to see your kids. And it's become political suicide if you move your family to Washington. We have to change that, make it the norm that families should do what works best for them. If you want to keep your kids at home or if you want to move them to Washington, it shouldn't be a political attack.
Yeah, because you noted that not only is it the high cost of childcare, but frequent travel to DC, unpredictable voting schedules. I mean, look just what happened recently, right? Where it's suddenly we are not having to come to work and then we have to stay later to do votes. I mean, people, especially those that live on the other side of the country, are facing these hurdles. And then your report showed that for the moms of minor children, we currently only have one pregnant mom right now in Congress. But it's 25 moms of minors, but they're in middle or high school. I mean, it's definitely older kids that are having their moms serving in Congress right now.
That's true. Moms will wait till their kids get older. And it's interesting. I remember I used to think it was so much harder to do this with smaller children. And to be honest, now that my kids are a little bit older, I have a 5-year-old, a 9-year-old, and an 11-year-old. I think they actually need you at home more when they're older. They need that presence. And so it's just as difficult, if not harder, for the moms who have older children. And we're seeing people choose consistently not to run because of their caregiving responsibilities. If we can break those barriers, if we can make it the norm that moms serve. So also, I mean, the first question every mom will get asked is, but who will watch your kids while you campaign? Dads don't get that question. And yet, if you want something done, you give it to a busy mom. So we have to change that norm. We have to talk about what it's like to be a mom and serve in Congress and run for Congress, because this is not just in the field of politics. Every woman has this experience of, don't talk about your kids, don't talk about your experience as a mom. You're not going to get the promotion or the board seat or the raise.
Yeah.
We need to normalize what it looks like to be a mom and serve in these positions of power. And that's really when we'll actually start to see policy changes across the board.
Well, the dads of the minor children, I'm looking at these numbers, they're clearly getting some support somewhere, right? Okay. I mean, the number is just wild compared to the moms. I also want to add a little bit of a wrinkle too. I mean, I know it's not a part of the research that y'all are doing, but as we age too, as our children are aging, our parents age too. Mm-hmm. And elder care, I think, falls disproportionately to moms or daughters, right? Often. I mean, I hate to, make a generalization, because there's some wonderful children that are taking care of their aging parents that are men, but I do find, I'm a sandwich generation person. I've got a 10-year-old daughter and an 82-year-old mom. And so you get it on both sides. And that's another factor considering, running for Congress or running for office.
You are 100% correct. And Vote Mama Lobby has been working to approve the use of campaign funds for not only childcare, but dependent care at the state level. We're now at 39 states that have approved the use of campaign funds for childcare, but our gold standard is really to also make sure it includes dependent care. I spoke with somebody, who wanted to run for Congress, but she had a very similar situation. She was a single mom, had a young son and an older mother that she cared for, and chose not to run. And that really is, it's a problem. So you're 100% right. The sandwich generation is something that really affects so many people in this country. And that's why campaign funds for child and dependent care is so critical.
So let our viewers know, the people that are tuning in and that will be watching this, where can they go to get more information, not only about this report and the politics of parenthood, but how they can learn more about your organization and look for, support if they should be, exploring the idea of maybe running?
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to learn more about the report, go to our foundation's website, so votemamafoundation.org. You can find all of our reports there. You can follow Vote Mama Lobby on Instagram, so at Vote Mama Lobby. And if you are a mom who's thinking of running for office, go to votemamapac.org. You can fill out our application and you can reach out and ask us questions.
When are you going to run again?
It's a good question. I will run again at some point. Right now, I am so busy building Vote Mama and making sure that we change the system, because my the reason I ran for Congress in the first place is I wanted to change our policies. But in order to change our policies, we have to change our policymakers. And to do that, we have to change our political system. So I'm working on that first, and then I will run again at some point. I promise you.
My gratitude always to the work that you're doing, and especially at Vote Mama, and just kind of generally too for being in the pro-democracy space. I think sometimes, Liuba, I think we fast forward past the basics. Yep. And I'm a big fan of saying we got to go back to the basics these days, even if it's just basic civics. Mm-hmm. We got to go back. And I think sometimes we need to focus on the infrastructure and the build and the foundation, right? And in order to do that, that's the work that y'all are doing at Vote Mama. So thank you so much for joining me today and for walking us through this report and sharing your wisdom. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Katie Phang here. We launched the Katie Phang News Channel in partnership with the Midas Touch Network so we could bring you the latest in legal and political news. Straight, no chaser. So if you're a fellow truth teller, hit that subscribe button and share the word about this channel so we can build a high information America together.